Hello, lads and lasses of 30 for 10. In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can set up Project 5 with VS Code. So I'm going to show you how you can get GDB to be integrated with VS Code and how you can set up auto-completion for your project. So I'm going to start with a rather fresh installation of VS Code. And so first I'm going to show you how you can connect to UGC Linux machines in VS Code. If you already know how to do this, just feel free to skip ahead. Otherwise, you can stick with me. So now you see there is an icon here that is called the marketplace or extensions. Go in here and search SSH. So the first thing that comes up should be the one that we want. So you want to just click install locally. Just make this larger. So click install locally. All right, now it's installed. And we can close this tab. Now we can connect to our remote machine. And to do that, you have to go to the command palette. You can find the command palette from the menu bar, but that's not the easiest way to do it. I think it's, let's see, the palette. You can find that in help, and it says it's in view command palette, and it says shift command P. On Windows or Linux, it should be control shift P. So we are just going to do command shift P, SSH, and you can add a new host over here. And what you're going to do is to just type in your net ID at ugclinux.cs.cornell.edu. And for the config file, you can choose anyone you like. It doesn't really matter, so just choose the first one. And it says that the host is added. The next step is to connect to the host. So do remote SSH connect to a host. And you see that the host is shown here. So just to click this one, it should open up in a new window. And you should be logged onto the UGC Linux machines. Normally it will ask you for your password. In my case, I have my public keys on the servers, so it did not ask me. If it's asking you, just give it your password. Okay, so now that we are on the UGC Linux machines, we can open the project files. Let's just resize this a little bit. We can go to File, Open, or Command O. It's probably Control O in Windows or Linux. So we're just going to do Open. And you can see that we have all the remote files in here. That's my home directory. So you want to make sure that you have your files for Project 5 on the servers. So in my case, I have them under my P file cache and release folder. So click this and OK. And it should be, what is it doing? So you should be able to see the starting files in here, and just click OK. And now you can see that all your files are over here. And so you can look at the files. For example, we can just open this cache.c file, right? So for the next step, make sure that you have a .c file opened. It doesn't matter which .c file that you have, as long as you have one of them open, because things wouldn't work if we don't have them. All right, the next step is to go to the marketplace again by clicking this icon. You can also get there by doing Command-Shift-X or Control-Shift-X on Windows. And so we are going to search C or C++. It's actually recommended in here, but just to make sure that you can find it, you can search C or C++, and you should see something like this, all right? And so you want to click this install on SSH. It's going to take a moment, and okay, it's installed. Now we can go back to our source files, open the .c file, and the next thing we are going to do is to tell VS Code what kind of build system we are doing. And the build system that we are using is make, because as you can see, we have a make file here. And we are going to build our project by calling make. So in the terminal, to build a project, we can just do make, and it's going to build the project for us. So we can make this easier without going to the terminal by telling VS Code how we are building our project. So go back to the .c file, go to the command palette by Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P, and you want to do tasks, configure default build task, and press enter. And actually I have the files already, so I'm going to remove them first and start from scratch. Delete permanently. That's quite scary. Okay, so let's try that again. Tasks, configure default build task. Okay, and you're going to choose the probably the first one is C or C++ GCC build active file. And the active file refers to the file that you have open in your VS Code. And that's why you need to have .c file open to do this. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So just click this. Don't use the GCC-9. Use GCC build active file. And what this is going to do is that it's going to create a folder called .vscode in your directory. And it's a hidden folder that stores all the information VS Code needs to help you with your development. And underneath that folder, there is a file that is called the tasks.json. And you can see that in here, it describes the task. And that task is basically how you build the project. And in our case, we can just go through these. And the first thing, or the primary thing that we want to change is the command. Because we are using make to build a project, the command we are going to use is make. So basically, we just change this to make, and we are not passing any arguments to make. if you want to pass any arguments, you can put them in here, but for simplicity, we are just going to remove all of it. The next important thing that we have to change from the template is current working directory, and it has to be our it has to be the folder that we are in. So in VS Code, it's called the workspace folder, and the rest should be fine the way they are. Save this file, and maybe go back to a .c file. Now you can build the project by pressing Command Shift B, or you can go to the command palette and just do build, and there is the tasks, the run build task. So we are just going to do Command Shift B here, and you can see that it builds the project for us. And of course, you can go back to this tasks.json file and customize what your command is depending on how you want to build the project. Okay. And the next thing we want to do is to tell VS Code how to launch the debugger. And to do that, we go to the command palette again, and we can type debug. And here is debug open launch.json. All right, click on this one, and it's going to ask you if you want to use GDB or Windows. And of course, we are going to use GDB. It's going to tell you that we are doing C++, but you don't have to worry about that. Just do this, and we are going to take the default configuration. Okay, so from the default configuration, again, the first thing that we have to change from the template is the program. So our program is going to be P5. That's the program that you passed into GDB. And in launch.json, you don't need the I think you still need this. You need to put this in front of your P5. So workspace folder /P5. If you don't do this, it doesn't work sometimes. But yeah, it's just in case. And so for the arguments, right? The arguments have to be, so you can find out what kind of arguments you want to pass by just by invoking P5 with -help flag. So remember that we just built the binary for P5, so we can run it, and it's going to give you all the options for the command line arguments. And for example, if we want to do this, we can just copy this and paste it in here, and it's going to give you some errors because this is JSON and you have to put everything in quotation marks. So, and that's what we are going to do. Just put everything in quotation marks and separated by commas. All right, that so this configuration should work. You may also change the name. You can call it debug simulation number 1. That's a very creative name. Okay, so if you did this part correctly, and you click on this icon to go to the debug pane, you should see that showing up in here. Okay, and to demonstrate how this works, we can go to p5.c and set a breakpoint after main. So just put a breakpoint in here, and I'm going to resize the window so that my face is out of the way. Okay, so you can go in here and just click Start Debugging. And you can see that the program stopped here at the first breakpoint. Up here is the control for the debugging session. There's continue, step over, step out, restart, and the stop. So we are just going to step a few steps. You may want to use the function keys for this. So for the step is F11, but it seems that Mac is mapping F11 to something else. If that happens, just press Fn with F11. Oh, it's still not working. I'm just going to click it. And you can see that it's stepping through the code. And then now we have a seg fault over here. But you can see the call stack and where it seg faulted. Okay. The other nice feature of this, or the other nice features of this debugging interface is that you get to see all the local variables over here. And if there are any global variables, it's probably going to show up here as well. And you can see I0, J0, and you can get to see the content of the cache. The capacity is 256, and cache tags. Okay. And you can also add variables to watch. If you watch something, it's just going to be pinned here for some time. Down here is the call stack. And you see that we call the make cache from main. And the last thing is the breakpoints. You can toggle the breakpoints from here if you want to, or you can, if you put breakpoints in here, it's going to show up here as well. And it's also going to show you the line number, and you can click on them to go to the breakpoints. Okay, I think that's the most of the features of the debugger. And I think this is as good as any debugging interface can get. So make sure that you are utilizing this. I'm going to stop debugging. And there are a few more things that I want to say. One of them is that if you want to have a different set of cache sizes, right? If you just want a different set of arguments, you can just copy and paste this configuration. So we are going to have a second configuration, and it's probably wise to give it another ingenious name, debug simulation 2. And we are going to change the arguments. So we are going to resort to the help menu of P5 again. And let's say that for the second experiment we want 962. We just change this to 962. Okay. And if you now go to the debugging pane, you should see the other debugging configuration here. So you can select this and restart the debugging again. And if you want to just run the simulator without debugging it, you can define a task to run it. So here we have the build task. We can create a test task. So we can just do something analogous to this. So here we can have the type, and you can see that we have auto completion here, and for our purposes, we are going to use the process type. And of course, what that means is just we are running a process. So, but before we move on, if you look at the other things over here, this is to run a shell command. This is to build a TypeScript project. This is to run an NPM task. That's for web developers. And these two are two other build systems. And I think they are also primarily used by web developers. And I think some people use these for Java as well. But well, that's kind of off the topic. We are just going to use process here. And for the label, just use your imagination. Test 1. And the thing that really matters is the command, right? And for the command, we are just going to do the same thing as in the debugger. So if we go back to launch.json, we're just going to take this. All right, it's just going to run P5. And for the arguments, we just copy from here. All right, and the last thing that we need is the group. And we are going to put this task in the test group. And all that this does is that these tasks show up when you run a test in the command palette, as I'm going to demonstrate now. So if you go to the command palette and just type test, and you should see tasks run test task. And within the test task, you see test 1, which is the one that we just created. So if you just click this, and you can see that is executing P5 with these command line arguments. Okay. I think that's all I want to say about debugging. There's one more thing that I want to mention, and that is the auto-completion. You want to make sure that your auto-completion is working, because that really makes your life much easier. So to validate that, if you go into cache.c, I think if you have the C++ plugin installed, it should just work without any further configuration. And if you just start typing small, yeah, it should be auto-completing. As the example, if you type make, it should give you things like make 2D matrix. As you can see, it's the function that we just defined here. And it shows you the arguments that it's expecting and the documentation for the function. And this documentation is extremely helpful. It tells you what you should do with this code. Okay. And as you can see that it also does syntax checking for you. So if you miss a semicolon, it's going to accompany something over here. It's telling you that it's expecting a semicolon. Okay, I think that should be enough to get you started on project 5. I think this is as good as any tool can get. And yeah, I hope that this helps. If it doesn't, I'm not offering any refunds.